Hey young friends, Dr. Bill here. As always, I'm very glad that you've chosen to spend a little bit of time with me as we continue to make our way through the big names in the Bible. You may recall that for the last several weeks we have been taking a look at the minor prophets, what is known to the Hebrew people as the Book of the 12. 12 prophets whose names and circumstances we might not be as familiar with as some of the other prophets in the Old Testament. Well, today we're going to take a look at Zephaniah. There's a book that bears his name and has a record of the messages he proclaimed to the Hebrew people. Now, the name Zephaniah means God has treasured or stored. It can even mean God has hidden. In other words, there is something valuable about God, something valuable that God has stored up for His people. Apart from that, we really don't know a whole lot about Zephaniah. The book that bears his name indicates that he was a citizen of the city of Jerusalem. That's where he lived. Regarding the time in which he lived, a lot of things were happening. The nation of Assyria, which had been a tremendous threat to the Hebrew people, was beginning to fade from power and fade from the scene. As well, however, Babylon, another nation, was rising in power and about to fill the vacuum left by Assyria. Babylon was getting stronger and stronger by the day, and they would eventually pose a real threat to the Hebrew people. As well, the Hebrew people were also threatened by a roaming band of bandits called the Scythians. They were all throughout the land where the Hebrew people lived, and they made their way traveling all over, stealing, robbing, plundering, taking things from people. And they were a terror to the Hebrew people. As well, during the time that Zephaniah prophesied, the people had begun to fall away from God. They were worshiping other idols. They were worshiping false gods. So that's the situation Zephaniah faced. And so here's his message. Zephaniah, like many of the other prophets before him, proclaimed the importance of the day of the Lord. Now, the day of the Lord was something a lot of the Hebrew people believed in. And their idea of the day of the Lord was that the day will come when God will show up and God will defeat all of our enemies and we will be safe. We won't have any trouble from anybody forever. Well, Zephaniah included that part of the message in his message. But Zephaniah added something else. He said to the Hebrew people, yes, the day of the Lord means that God is going to come and defeat our enemies. But he also said, the day of the Lord means that God is going to come and judge us. It's not just about God getting rid of those whom we fear. It's about God asking us about how we live. What have we done? It's about God taking a close look at our lives to see how faithful we are. So that's an important part of Zephaniah's message. The other part is this. He also stressed that no matter how bad things got, no matter how many threats there were, no matter how many enemies were pushing against the Hebrew people, there would always be a remnant. There would always be a small group who remained faithful no matter what. When times got hard, when things got dangerous, he said there will always be a group of the Hebrew people who will remain faithful to God and will not turn aside from serving God. That's an important concept. And the truth is, the Hebrew people exist to this day because there has always been a remnant. And even for us as Christians, the idea is that no matter how hard and difficult things get for us trying to hold on to our faith, God promises that our faith will endure. There will always be a remnant. There will always be a people to carry on. And then Zephaniah was very, very firm in stressing to the Hebrew people the importance of worshiping God and God alone. He said, you need to turn away from idols. You need to stop worshiping false gods. Now, unlike the other prophets we've taken a look at, Zephaniah didn't say anything particular about bad things that the people were doing. Didn't say, hey, stop lying, stop cheating the poor, nothing like that. No, Zephaniah stressed the important thing is for us to worship God and worship God alone. So that's the message of this very short but important book. So what do we take away from this? Well, Zephaniah reminds us, as with all the other minor prophets, that we don't have to be a big name to be important. History has forgotten a whole lot of stuff about Zephaniah, yet his message and his influence continues. Somewhere along the line, the Hebrew people decided that even though his book was short, even though they didn't know much about him, they decided that his message was very, very important, and they needed to make sure they remembered it. They didn't want to forget. And what that says to me is that we don't have to be really, really important or really, really powerful to have an influence, to have a positive effect on those around us and our world. Just because nobody knows our name doesn't mean that we can't do big or important things. The second part of his message is this: truth-telling is always important. It's important for us to speak the truth, even when that truth may be hard for our hearers to accept. Zephaniah had to say to the people, here's the real truth. Yes, God is coming to judge the other nations, but God is also coming to judge us. And that was probably an unwelcome message. Nevertheless, Zephaniah stuck to his guns and he continued to speak the truth. For us as faithful people, that's part of our task. It's to keep speaking and telling the truth to others and also to ourselves, even when the truth may be something we really don't want to hear. So that's what that's about. Well, I hope you've learned something about this little-known prophet from our time together today. As always, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me and I'll be glad to talk with you anytime, anywhere. I hope this week is going well for you, and in the meantime, do your best to stay faithful to God, and I will see you again next week. Take care and God bless. Bye-bye.